Hello, everybody. This is the old Henderson Real News Show. Of course, we want to address two people this evening, two different groups, our listeners and viewers. This is the old Henderson Real News Show. And as you know, we always call it organize, don't criticize. Now, most of you know that during the last 10 years, we've been talking about real news. We have always stayed away from opinions. We only deal with facts and what we call research information that has been proven to be factual. And that's what we talk about and going to continue to talk about it for the next 6 years. Every time you hear us talk on the Old Henderson Real News Show, Organize, Don't Criticize, we're talking about black people. We're talking about what black people and people of color need to do in order to be saved while they're on earth. We give what we call a livable salvation plan, certain things that black people must do from the local level to the international level if they want to continue to be considered a non-entity in the world. As you know, if you do any studies or read any studies anywhere, you'll find that black people in America, black people in the world have always been considered since 1300, a non-entity, one that can be abused and accused and dealt with in a manner that shows no respect to that individual or to those groups as human beings. And that's why, as the years have passed, listeners and viewers, the black people throughout the world are losing ground economically, socially, politically, and of course they have very, very limited leadership abilities because they don't control certain economic development initiatives that's available. And our job is to tell you how to change that and how to start changing it in 30, 60, 90 days, because we have something called the Prioritized Corrective Action Plan, where you can address any issue in your life starting in 30, 60, 90 days. And if you put an agenda together, determine who is gaining from where you are suffering, determining what benefits they receive, and then you have to figure out how you can receive those benefits by taking them from the people that are suppressing you or oppressing you, and you will find that you have something called equity, and your enemies will want to become your friends even though they will still hate you. And then you will have your enemies close to you, where you can watch them just like you can watch your friends. Enemies and friends are the same. Usually your friends will stick with you when things are bad. But when they get a chance to get closer to you, to get some of your gains, they're going to do it. Your enemies always figure out a way to hurt you financially, politically, economically, socially, and take over and take your goods and services forever and demean you and give you what I call that 3 to 4 generational curse, where you believe you are totally worthless. And then you start thinking that there is no democracy in the world, that there is nothing called equality in the world, that there is nothing considered as good for the general welfare of your people throughout the world. I'm not concerned very much about what happened to the people in Mississippi, in the South, in the nation or the world. One must work as a unit throughout the world, black folks. And that's why today I will be giving you a summary of the shows that we have done throughout the last year, 2023. I will give you 3 things today. We're going to give you the Europeans' assignments for life. We're going to talk about the summary of those 5 areas of activity that black people must control if they want to get some dignity as human beings. They must control 5 areas of activity. We'll go through those one by one. And then we're going to show you that once you do that, you will have yourself in a position where you can escape poverty. Folks, poverty is something that is killing black and poor people all over the world. the American black people, about 1/3 are poverty-stricken. The black people worldwide, about 55% are poverty-stricken. Much of this is done because people have been told that they can't do any better, that they must be submissive to others. Others have been told that you can do this if you leave that submissiveness away from your psychic and decide that you are a man, you are a woman, whether you live in Mississippi, the South, the United States, or anywhere in the world as a black person, and that you are born to dominate, to control the areas where you're in the majority, everywhere, started on the precinct level. Imagine, anywhere a black person is in control as a majority of the population, they should control the 5 areas of activity that we've been talking about for years. First one, education and training. I will give you more detailed information in a minute. The second area you must control, black folks, if you want to become a real American, if you want to become a real citizen in the world, and that is your religion. I'm not telling you that you have to prepare yourself to go to heaven when you die. That's an individual thing. I'm telling you that you must have some moral standards that you must practice and teach to your children. Teach it to your family members and teach it to your community people. I call it the people that's in your community organization. The third area that you have a lot of lacking, and that is principles of leadership. Black people have always been in a position here recently when they start loving and promoting and begging for integration, where they are in a position where the leadership is only an illusion. Just because they have themselves in big positions, they can't control the personnel. They can't control the policy. They can't control the finances. So therefore, the so-called enemies of mankind, there's a group called the human enemies of mankind, their relatives and friends, have always decided that we have to keep goods and services in our favor. We have to dominate, and we are going to have to put the 75% of the so-called black and colored folks behind us. We have to continue to rule and tell them that they are insignificant. And that's what I'm going to share with you today for the first 15 minutes. And then we'll get in part 2, which I told you I will give you a summary of those 5 areas of activities and tell you what you have to do individually and collectively there. And the last segment will be ways to escape poverty. Ways to escape poverty. Folks, a lot of you have a lot of poverty to deal with. 3 and 4 generations. I know families where they have 5 generations of poverty since the early 1900s to today. And I'm not talking about the 1800s, just since the 1900s. 5 generations. The parents, the grandparents, the great-grandparents, uncles, cousins, nieces, nephews. Many of them that's from 80 to 0 birth are poor and have been poor since the 1900s. And folks, you need to learn how to escape poverty, and I will give you that in a summarized fashion this afternoon. Now let me show you and tell you with facts and good examples of why black people worldwide are in this situation they are in those 5 areas of activity: education, politics, economic development, leadership, and religion. Is because the Europeans throughout the world have been given an assignment for life. Now, you don't want to believe facts, folks. You all hear things, you don't want to believe it. If you don't hear it from the preacher and the politician, you don't think it's true. Their job is to maintain the status quo and promote their interests, their family's interests, not yours. So therefore, they are not going to tell you anything that's going to disturb what we call the average peace and order. Now, what is the problem, folks? Now, I will give you one thing to consider, and that is when you hear what most Europeans' assignment is for life, some of you are going to say the man is crazy. I don't believe it. I know they love me. The Europeans love me. I know they do. Look what they have done for me. Since the 1500s, they were good to me until 1865. They gave me free transportation, free housing, a full-time job from birth to death. They gave me food to keep me strong and working. And then they gave me enough medical care, free of charge, to keep me functioning so I can do 14, 16, and 18 hours a day. That's why I love the Europeans. That's what a lot of you all have been taught. You teach it to your children. But Europeans throughout the world, I'm not talking about all of them, I'm talking about most of them. And when I say most in my presentation, I'm always talking about 90 to 95% of whatever I'm talking about. So most Europeans' assignment for life and during their lifetime is to perpetuate one goal. And that goal is to dominate blacks and people of color worldwide. Keep it in mind. There's one goal of all Europeans, I'm saying most, 90% to 95% worldwide, is to dominate black people and people of color worldwide. That's what they have been taught by their grandparents, their fathers and mothers, their uncles, cousins, the sons and daughter-in-laws. They teach that. And they teach this through a system that is one of the best systems for control in the world. And that system that these Europeans have been assigned for life is to teach and practice white supremacy. We're not going to go in detail today about what white supremacy is. Some say it's good if you are teaching it. If you are a white supremacist, it's better than Christianity, because you follow those rules much more seriously than you follow the so-called Christian role. The role of a Christian is to love their neighbors as brothers and sisters, even to love their enemies, all kinds of radical and unnecessary things that are not practiced by the so-called Christians throughout the world. When you are taught from birth to death to teach and practice white supremacy, you think you're headed on the right road. But I'm going to show you today and throughout next year that you are not going to believe this when we give you all the facts and show you that you can change your life, ladies and gentlemen. I'm talking about black folks worldwide, from birth to death, if you control those 5 areas of activity that I mentioned. Now, let me tell you what the Europeans have been taught. They say in all areas of activity, education, economics, politics, religion, and leadership are the areas that we're specifically going to dominate. We're going to make the policies, all the rules, hire the people, and fund the programs that we want that's going to keep us teaching and practicing white supremacy. We're going to dominate. We're going to exclude most of the blacks and people of color worldwide. If we give them a position of what I call responsibility, it's going to be insignificant. They were always going to be an assistant. I told you last month, they're going to be called co-directors, assistant directors, advisors, and never ask you for advice. Pay you $95,000 a year to be an advisor to a group of white supremacists, and they never ask you for any advice. And when you get ashamed of getting paid, and start say, boss, why I don't get a chance to give you some advice? Things are not going well around here. They say, well, put it on paper, send it to us. We'll look at it. So, folks, I'm telling you, when you have people like this that's looking out for their interests and putting your interests on the back burner, you're going to find that your destiny then is getting worse gradually, which is going to be a permanent, gradual activity that's going to put you in a position where you're going to think that your days are short. Because when you are born to teach and practice white supremacy anywhere in the world, you are teaching your folks, ladies and gentlemen, that are guilty, those that are guilty of teaching this system. Great system. It works well, folks. Works well. You are teaching your people, your children, grandchildren, your cousins, your son-in-laws, mother-in-laws, grandparents, and others, generation after generation, to do the following to black people in Mississippi, in the South, in the nation, and throughout the world. You're teaching your folks to kill, to abuse, to discriminate, to enslave, to castrate the men and women, and impregnate them. We have shows that we're going to talk about next year, 2024, where we show you how the Europeans' assignment was to kill and abuse black folks worldwide, how they were taught through their laws and police and military to discriminate, how they were taught in their judicial systems how to enslave, how they were taught in their medical practices to castrate men and women and say, you're not good enough to have any more children. You're in poverty. You don't know how to read and write. You went to school and you didn't learn anything. And you always living in the poorest part of town. But they forget to tell you that they created those situations for you. And you didn't know how to get out because you were loving your enemies. You were practicing that thing that we call salvation, where you wanted to die and go to heaven because you had been told by the same races, the same people that practice white supremacy, that you're supposed to love me. Love me. I'm your God because I represent God up in heaven. That's what Jesus Christ said. Read the Bible. He said, even though I'm a man, I am he. My God is up in heaven. I'm his direct representative. And I'm here to give you the word. And when I leave, I'm going to leave something else in charge. And that's going to be the Holy Spirit. And it's going to have you moving in the right direction. But at the same time, honor me. Listen to my word. Practice what I've told you, and you'll be all right. After you live in hell on earth and die, and then you can come up here with me in this fictitious heaven, and I'll give you an opportunity to walk on the streets of gold. Eat that good honey, good old walnuts, and sit close to the angels and get under their wings and just enjoy life for eternity. And a lot of you all believe that. You believe it. Nothing wrong with it if you want to believe it. If you've been brainwashed to believe that kind of propaganda, that is all right. But you must do some things on earth before you die. Because you have to understand, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't do anything for self, you're going to find that the human enemies of mankind, those that have been given this assignment for life, is going to continue to mistreat you. They are still going to use that systematic, institutional racist standards and policies, going to keep you clamped down until you die while you're on earth. You're not going to go to a situation and get money from a bank. even if you're qualified to buy land and homes and other things in certain parts of your county, in your city, or in your state. You're not going to be able to go and get what we call free and equitable situations in the military. You are going to be relegated to the lower ranks. They get 2 or 3 that they have trained to be good European types. They were sent a few to the Naval Academy, Air Force Academy, and others. They will allow a few to get into ROTC programs in these colleges. But they're going to train those guys to have that European concept, those guys and women. And if they seem to be radical, they will never get out of college as a second lieutenant. They will never get out of that military academy, that free academy where they spend over $200,000, sometimes more, per year on your few sons and daughters that get into those institutions, because they are to teach the American way. They are taught to teach the European way. They are assigned to those same things. Look at the situation now in the Middle East. The Jewish and Palestinian situation. Who is over there, basically? 2 black men, 2 generals, and a white ambassador, mostly, running over there and telling them what Joe Biden said. So you can kill, but just don't kill too many. So you need to keep yourself in a position where you can keep your favorite status in the United Nations. Don't starve them all out. Don't have them starving to death, folks. Medically malpractice is happening all over this area. No homes, no transportation. Whole families have to get together with what they can carry in their hand. And if they can't get the hands loose because they've been shot or wounded somewhere, they put all they can on a little cart and get one of them hungry donkeys to pull it down the street. I see it and been seeing it for months and years, really, in that part of the country. So that's what we call the Europeans' assignment for life, to teach, to dominate black people and people of color worldwide. Some of you don't believe it, and that's why you're afraid to read history. You're afraid to read history, folks, because you are going to find that if you read history, you will be hurting, shedding tears, not even able to go to Sunday school to be miseducated when you read the history of the Europeans in America. And they know that's a fact, because they too don't want their children to learn American history. And I don't blame them. If I had been as abusive as most Europeans have been against blacks and people of color worldwide, I would want my children to know what I've been doing to the people of color in America, in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, even on the North Pole and South Pole. If you ain't white in those areas too, you're discriminated against. They go in those areas and take everything those folks have. Talk about how they dress. Talk about their language. Talk about their cultures, their religion, their lack of leadership. And those folks been over there for thousands of years, and they were able to work and hunt and fish and live and thrive until the Europeans got there, and they told them, from now on, we're going to determine how many fish you can catch, how many deer you can catch, how many birds you can kill, how many buffaloes you can kill, and then we are going to keep you from doing any of that, because we will take care of you. We're going to feed you, because you got to move, Doc. You got to move. You got to go to another land. You can't handle what you have here. You don't even know anything about government. You don't know anything about land management. You don't even know how to control the animals in your area. All you do is kill just enough to feed yourself and to help yourself live from day to day, from year to year. We want to kill them, so you won't have nothing to eat. And folks, I'm telling you right now, it's getting to the point where we are going to take a short break. Going to take a short break, and I want you to listen to those advertisements and think about the good coffee you're going to hear them talk about. And listen to what else you find. In just a few minutes, we'll be back. And during this period, I want you to call someone and say, listen to the L. Henderson Real News Show. Tell it to them. Say, go and click in WeBelieveDigital.com, and you'll hear the real news. Organize. Don't criticize. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earth Blend Coffee.
To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
Are you dreaming of becoming an entrepreneur, but you're not sure where or how to start? At Entrepreneurs Academy 101, our online program will guide you step by step on how to start and grow your own business. We offer courses such as how to write a business plan, how to create a budget, and so much more. Our online training program is designed for you to learn at your own pace, and there's no set order to complete this program. Because our academy is online, you have the choice to learn with a group, with friends, or individually. Upon completion of the entire curriculum, you will receive a certificate of achievement to acknowledge that you have completed the training needed to become a successful entrepreneur. So enroll today to design the life that you love. Contact your entrepreneur coach, Brenda Myers, at 601-672-0695 or visit our website at www.entrepreneursacademy101.com for more information.
Okay, folks, we are glad to have you back, the viewers and listeners. This is the L. Henderson Real News Show. Organize, don't criticize. This is part 2. We have about 15 parts, and you'll hear more in 2024 and beyond, hopefully. And today, though, we are giving you a summary of the things we've been talking about during the last year. It's not quite over, but during the various shows during 2023. And today, we're talking about 3 things. One is the European assignments for life. I'm talking about most of them, 90 to 95%. And I'm going to give you a summary of the 5 areas of activity that they've been dominating in and teaching you to become a clown and a clone, to do and parrot the things you have been taught so you can be a good American, so you can be a good African, so you can be a good member in the groups up there at the North and South Pole and in Latin America and over there in Canada and other places that's practicing the same thing. So I was telling you folks, when you have groups that been teaching things to all of their members from age 1 until they die, you teach it first. And then you do like they have done in the ghettos in America, in Asia, in Africa. Once you teach things and you are in a position of control, you have to have then a community of gangbangers to enforce what you have taught, and then you just lay your burden down and step out of the way because you have trained them to do the things you've been teaching all their lives. And I call that the community of gangbangers that's going to enforce those laws, those institutional laws, those systemic laws that just automatically jump into the constitutions and the policies and the compacts and agreements, contracts that the Europeans make with others. And that community of gangbangers are real people. They are real, All the people do is make the policy and tell the community of gangbangers to enforce it. And the first tier of the community gangbangers for most European in their institutional practices are the police. That's why they have so many. And that's why you don't have to have high standards to be at the lower end of the gang. To be a policeman in America and in most parts of the world, you just have to be a male or female, preferably a male, and be at least 18 years of age. And up until recently, they didn't have any educational requirements. Now they do expect you to have a high school diploma or a GED or to know someone in the police department. And they can get around that. The next group they have to maintain the status quo from the Europeans that assigned you to learn and teach racism and white supremacy is the military. Boy, they are good in promoting and protecting white supremacy and their institutional laws. Those laws that's been generated in areas that were taken 400 and 500 years ago, even though many of those areas kicked the Europeans out. But they say, we're going to rule because we're going to keep a military attachment right in this country. And we're going to find us some leaders that allow us to do it. And if you don't allow us to do it, Mr. New President in this African or Latin American country, we are going to get rid of you. We'll find someone to be the president tomorrow if we choose. And I tell you what I want you to do. I want you to come on over here. Let me give you the last instruction so you'll know how to act because you're a good boy. We trained you. We sent you to some of our best schools in Europe, in Asia, and America. We really love you, boy. So you come on here now and let me teach you how we want you to act. You've been president now for 5 years in this country. We just gave you independence. But you've been acting up. So we want to teach you what to do. So we're going to send a plane, a military plane, the presidential #2 plane, to bring you over for this conference. And they get that African leader, that leader in America, that leader in Latin America, whatever, and talk to him or her. You know, they're getting a few more females now in these political agenda items. They are usually secretaries, researchers, and others. And they travel too with these leaders. And they talk to those leaders, and after 3 or 4 days, they have a dinner and a conference. And then they, just before they leave, they give them their marching orders and say, now we taught you well the last 3 or 4 days, Mr. President. Now can you do these things? We want to put another military base in your country. We want to build more businesses in your country, but we want to put it in a well-defined area with highways, water systems, electrical grids. We don't want you to worry about being confused with a new system in your communities and neighborhoods. We want to get away from you. We don't want to be in your business. We want to be on our little island. And that's when they put that new colony in that area. Some people call it that gated community. And the only thing the Africans, the Americans, and others can do in those areas is to go there during the daytime and cook and clean and take care of old folks and children. Pass through that gated community and you're out. You're not to be coming back unless there's emergency at night. Then they'll send someone to get you. The other community gangbanger that they have in positions of power to monitor things and keep black folks worldwide in a position of evil, of death, is another group that most of you don't want to admit, is the banker. Folks, you don't understand that black people throughout the world have billions and millions of dollars to spend. But if you want to buy something that's going to impact the Europeans in a negative way, especially in their area of influence, in their industrial regions, in their residential pattern circle, you're not going to get that bank loan, folks. Same thing, the other group they have is the corporate leaders that's been trained. I told you last week and many months before that those corporate leaders have quotas. I don't care if you get 10 degrees from the so-called London School of Economics, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Jackson State University, Tougaloo, or wherever it is, you are not going to get too far in the corporate leadership in a position of responsibility. Of course, they will make you a vice president. Of course, if you are super intelligent, you might become the president of one of their educational institutions or one of the corporate entities. But I guarantee you, you're going to have a board of control that's going to tell you what you can do. We'll go through all of that next week and week after then, all 2024. We have 6 years to get this thing to get it straight. 6 years. By the year 2029, December the 31st, you will have to learn to dominate in these 5 areas that I've been talking about for a while with my co-host from time to time, Socrates Garrett. We have talked about these things. If you don't have it done in 6 years, you're out for 300 years. You're going to be worse off than when you were in slavery in America, when you were enslaved in Europe, when you were enslaved in Africa and Latin America and in Asia. And it's going to last for another 300 years. Because when the police, the military, the bankers, and the corporate leaders get with you and don't do nothing but try to keep you duped and confused, if you start making progress then, folks, out of all of that, and you got a leadership position, the last gangbanger they have is those medical teams. I guarantee you, I don't care how good you are or how bad you are, you're going to get sick. And sooner or later, you got to go to the hospital or to a doctor's office. And many leaders don't get out. Next year, we're going to name some that were doing great jobs. They got sick all of a sudden, had to go to the hospital or get emergency surgery. Many of them ended up in mental institutions, ended up with cancer, had other problems, and all of a sudden, they couldn't work anymore. They had to resign and say, folks, I'm the mayor of this city. I'm the president of this university. I am the assistant vice president at this corporate entity. But due to health-related issues, I'm going to have to step down for a short while, and I'll be back. In less than 6 months, you have a funeral to attend. That's the way it goes. Police, military, bankers, corporate leaders, medical teams. Of course you don't believe these things happen. Do the research, ladies and gentlemen, do the research. If you're afraid to try to talk about this in your public school system, I don't blame you, because they don't teach this kind of thing. If you want to get to the point where you discuss this with your peers in those what we call integrated schools, we call them the public schools now, the private schools, the church schools, the charter schools, if you think you're going to talk about these issues there, it's not going to happen. We call it critical race theory. They don't want their children to know about it. I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to teach my child all of my ills that I've committed during the last 500 years, because they start hating me, their old grandfather, their father, their mother, their brothers and sisters, their aunts. Oh, it's bad, folks. But there's some good. And we'll give you that good, but not today. We're going to share the bad with you so you can have a wonderful Christmas. And I want you all to talk about this when you're eating that turkey and chewing those chitlins that a lot of you all pretend you don't like. Eating that ham, macaroni and cheese that's killing you. And all this other stuff you're going to be doing in the next week and a half. Borrowing money at the bank. Not going to happen. You got to go to that neighborhood bank. We call it the loan company. And borrow $500 or $600 and pay it back $1,500 to $2,500 on that $500 or $600. Because they're not going to let you pay it off, folks. Every time you go, get down to $250, they're going to tell you, well, look, we'll let you have another $50. No interest if you pay it back in 30 days. Hell, you know you can't pay it back in 30 days. You already owe them $250, but they tell you, and you're going to be stupid enough to get the $50 or even another $100 and have no interest for 30 days and then end up paying another $500 for $500. 5-10 years when you could have paid it off in one period if you had to save your money and use what we call good budgeting and borrow money and pay it off in 30 days. That's what you have to do, but you don't know about that yet. That's called financial literacy. We're going to talk about that next year. So when you get all these people together, folks, you then understand, and if you don't, I'll show it to you and tell you, that once you have this kind of training in racism and white supremacy has been taught to all members in your family, all your institutional leaders and others, guess what's going to happen to the black population in Mississippi, in the South, in the nation, and in the world? These black folks going to have a lot of problems, folks. I'm telling you, they're going to have a lot of problems. You don't want to hear it. Now, if you don't want to hear it, just turn the volume down. Don't turn it off. And if you really want to turn it down and you can't hear it, just record it and walk on out of the room and look at some local news. Get on the phone and call your cousin in Chicago and say, you look at it. I can't look at it anymore. And just record it. Because when you listen to all this propaganda that I've been telling you that has been devised to keep you a non-entity, a non-citizen, one with no constitutional rights in the South, in the nation, in the world, one that you permitted and encouraged continuously for generation after generation, then you end up with some problems. Some of you say it's not a problem. And the problem that black people throughout the world end up with when they have been taught all their lives since the 1700s in America, throughout Asia and Africa, Latin America, the North and South Pole, they end up with the number one problem. They love their enemies because they've been taught that. Some of you still believe it. Matter of fact, Mr. Socrates Garrett talked about this with me last week. Matter of fact, Tuesday this week, talked about loving your enemy. I was taught that. So you're supposed to love your enemy. Watch your friends. I say you get both of them together, your enemies and your friends, and watch both. And as soon as you can get away from them, do it. But you better love yourself first, your family second, your community third. That's what I call organizing. Be self-centered. Make sure your family has everything the family needs to be progressive so they can promote the goodness that they have learned and pass it on to their next generation. I always believe that anything that's taught ought to be good enough to last for 3 generations. And then when you get that together, you got to look at your community, because black folks don't have a community when you love your enemies to the point where they tell you that I am the supreme one, love me. You don't even love yourself enough, ladies and gentlemen, to build your own community. You have billions of dollars to spend, and you won't even create a bank in your neighborhood. You won't even tell your church leaders that you all have $4 million a Sunday to take to the bank on Monday from any little city or area where you have 10 or 15 to 100,000 black folks. Every Monday, 5, 10, $15 million going to the local bank. And I told you before, you're not going to get any of that money if you want to spend it outside of your community. So you taught to love your enemy. And in religion, we're just going through the different areas now. We was telling you that you has been used religiously. They told you your religion is deficient. We know how to get you saved. Listen to us. Join our church. We're going to give you a black man and make him the assistant to the president of this white denomination. But he's not going to preach. And he will travel around, but he will only talk to mixed groups. He will never be in a private meeting where he can make policy for the denomination. They do it in the corporate arena. They do it in education arena. That's why the church is so good at it, because it started in the church. Racism, white supremacy, discrimination, institutional, systemic problems that are taught from generation to generation. And when you get through with all that religious stuff and all that learning to love your enemy, the next thing they taught you folks is that you're supposed to love me so until you want to integrate with me. Forget about your institutions. Even though they might be weak, you don't need them. Integrate with us and bring all your resources to us. Close your restaurants. Close your churches. Close your businesses. Close your non-communities, which you don't have. We haven't allowed you to have any. And even come to us, just a few of you, and we'll let you marry some of our children if you have a lot of money. So you better not play football or baseball or basketball. We'll let you marry a few of them. And we have already taught our daughters to love you if you have something. And they've been told to have a child or two by you. And as soon as you get sick or get cut, we have told them to find a reason to separate from you. And if you can't get picked up by another big professional team in the areas that I mentioned, they ought to leave you, take the kids, and just before you get broke, make the courts give them $30,000 to $40,000 a month for child support, take their house, give them a nice car to drive in that's insured, that's paid for cash, and give you visitation, but not at the home where the children live. They would bring the kids to you in a chauffeured car that you have given them. A chauffeured car with their own security. And while you talk to your little son or daughter, the security, and usually a nurse sitting in the next room watching what's going on. And that's why you're confused. That's why you're on drugs and alcohol is about to take you. And that's why you still with your mama, your grandma, or Aunt Mary. That's why you're broke. That's why you don't have that passion just as you had 5 or 10 years ago when you could run up and down the football field and make 3 to 5 touchdowns per game, make 30, 40, 50, sometimes 60 points per game, sometimes 80, 90. I heard of one guy making 100 points during one game or two. Look at those boys now. If they're not dead, they're almost dead. Can't hardly walk. Can't hardly talk. Dead broke. Still can't let that alcohol and drugs go because they finally learn that you don't love your enemy. You don't give everything you have, your religion, your positions of leadership. Go and get yourself miseducated by leaving your education and training institution and going to theirs. Because you're in those high-powered positions, they don't expect you to learn anything other than to play those games so you can go on into pro to make that big money. They care nothing about the 90% of the young people that's in these school systems throughout the world. If you're black, if you're people of color, do the research and see what happens to that 90% that I've been talking about for a long time. The other thing that this racism and white supremacy is going to teach you black folks, and I call this another black problem, and that is they're going to teach you to practice group distrust, group self-hatred. And they're going to teach you group self-destruction. Kill yourself. Poison yourself. Lose your mind because you are finally wondering and decided that I made some mistakes. Now you're too sick to correct them. Your mama already told you, son, you're 35 years old. You used to be a millionaire. You gave me a home, and I couldn't help it. I had to go and borrow some money on my home when you started using all those drugs and when you lost that big contract when you were only 30 years of age. Now the bad news is the banker telling me I got 30 days to pay $50,000 for this home. That's all I owe, just $50,000. When you bought it for me, you paid $1 million for it. I told you I didn't need a big house like that. I told you you ought to just build up the one that I love down in my so-called black community with the people that I love, my good neighbors and friends. I want to stay at my church with Reverend Peterson. And you said, Mama, no, you got to go to the suburbs. I said, I told you I was going to take care of you. I told you I was going to get you a maid, a gardener, a chauffeur. Now, folks, this is a 3-hour program that I have today. We only did 30 minutes, 2 30-minute sessions. And this last session is gone, and we're going to make it the next time. Probably call it part 6 or 7 or whatever, because we have a lot of different shows going on. But this is about to end today's Eld Henderson Real News Show. Organize, don't criticize. But we want to tell you, you got to get ready. You got to start thinking about 3 things. Organize, don't criticize. And if you want to know more, folks, about how to get yourselves together in 2024 through December the 31st, 2029, you got to stay tuned to the Eld Henderson Real News Show. Organize, don't criticize. And the other thing you're going to have to do, folks, to get us to your community so we can talk in your churches, your schools, your community organizations, at your family reunions, at your conferences and workshops that you have all over the world. We want to come and talk to you. All you have to do is call us at 601-201-1957. Email us at clu369@gmail.com or call us at 1-800-492-5186. That's 1-800-492-5186, and say, I want to talk to Eld Henderson of the Eld Henderson Real News Show, the man that talks about organizing. Stop criticizing. We don't know who's going to answer the phone, but they have a lot of folks around here that answer the phone, and they'll get us that information, and we'll get the details from you, and we'll come and talk to you and give you the non-radio version of what we talk about teach you organization, organizing, leadership. We give you the things that you'll be a fool to talk about on radio and television and put in the newspaper. That's not leadership, to give all your strategies to the human enemies of mankind. You do that, folks, they'll kill you before you get old. You'll end up in jail. You'll end up in a box somewhere, a refrigerator down in a basement. You end up being involved with the police, the military, the corporate gangbangers. Oh, it's bad. So until tomorrow, which is Friday, I want you to be back with WeBelieveDigital.com, and you will see a show called The Doc and Sock Show. We'll be on from 6 until 7 p.m. tomorrow at WeBelieveDigital.com, and we will be going every week, 3 and 4 shows a day, starting in 2024. Folks, we don't have but 6 years. Until tomorrow, folks, I want to say this is the Eld Henderson's Real News Show. And always remember, until the day you die, organize, don't criticize. The human enemies of mankind love it when you criticize, because they know you're thinking about them and not doing anything for yourself. Now, isn't that a good strategy? See you next week or tomorrow. Thank you very much.